Hello, class. It's Mr. Mormon. Today we're going to be talking about organic chemistry. I've broken this video down into two different parts. This part we'll talk about organic molecules. I'll give you an introduction to organic molecules, and then we'll talk about carbohydrates. In the next video, we'll talk about the other types of organic molecules, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. So let's start with a definition. Organic chemistry is all about studying the molecules that living things are made of. An organic molecule, we're going to learn there's four different classes of organic molecules, but an organic molecule in general is going to contain carbon-to-carbon bonds. Also, organic molecules will contain both carbon and hydrogen atoms. I think it would be important to mention at this point why carbon is such an important element in all living things. Why are we carbon-based life forms on this planet? Carbon contains four valence electrons in its outer energy level. Its Lewis dot structure or electron dot structure would look like this. With only four valence electrons, carbon has four empty spaces in that outer energy level to reach the comfortable level of 8. Remember the octet rule. Elements try to, they'll make bonds to fill up that outer energy level to get up to 8. And because of this, carbon likes to make 4 bonds. In addition, carbon can bond with many different elements. Hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, and nitrogen, to name a few. Carbon can also bond to itself, forming long chains or rings and other complex structures. Here are some examples of some organic molecules that, of course, are made with carbon, and you can see all the different configurations you can get. Notice also that there are single bonds, double bonds, and triple bonds. Of course, the lines between the atoms are representing the bonds, and you can see some that are doubled up and tripled up. Again, the bonds can be single, double, or triple. So all these characteristics make it possible to form millions of different compounds out of carbon. Very large and complex structures are possible because of this universal ability to bond that carbon has. No other element even comes close to matching carbon's versatility. Many organic molecules are what we would call macromolecules. They're giant molecules made of hundreds or even thousands of smaller molecules. And this diagram represents that. The smaller molecules would be the monomers that we see here. The monomers are then linked together by a process called polymerization, and they link together one after another, forming the much larger macromolecule, which we would call a polymer. Now, there are 4 different types of organic molecules that we need to know in this class. Carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and finally proteins. So we'll be treating each one of the organic molecules separately. We're going to start with carbohydrates on this video, and then tomorrow we'll do the other 3. Living things use carbohydrates as their main source of energy. Some examples would be sugars and starches. In carbohydrates, the ratio of carbon to hydrogen to oxygen is usually 1 to 2 to 1. Glucose, for example, is 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens, C6H12O6. Glucose, which is also known as blood sugar, is what our cells are using for energy. I often like to think of glucose as cell food. Now remember, glucose is a sugar. In the cells, cellular respiration releases energy from glucose. Glucose is the fuel. Remember, cellular respiration was one of the 8 life functions we talked about earlier in this unit. Now, starches are made up of long chains of sugars. Starches would contain even more energy than a single sugar molecule would. Here we see a diagram of a starch molecule. The starch molecule is a polymer. It is made up of several smaller subunits, these glucose molecules, which would be the monomers. Examples of starchy foods would be anything made from grains. Wheat or grains would be good examples of starchy foods. Bread, pasta, rice. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense why grains would have so much stored energy in them. Grains are seeds, and seeds need to contain the energy to get the next generation started. So they're going to be very energy-rich foods, anything made from a grain. Another important example of a carbohydrate is cellulose. Plants and some animals use cellulose for structural purposes. The cell wall on the outside of a plant cell is made of cellulose. Here we see some actual cells that would be under what they would look like under a microscope. And this part that I'm outlining would be the cell wall. Around each cell there's a cell wall which is made of cellulose, and it gives the plant cell its structure. This diagram shows what I'm talking about. Here we see the tree and its cells. The cell walls are made of this fibery material, and if we could see the individual molecules, they would look like this. Each one of these rings here, these monomers, would be cellulose. They form these long chains, and they're very tough fibers. Because the cell walls are made out of cellulose, that's the main ingredients in wood. Here's a picture taken through a microscope of paper. Paper, as you know, is made from wood, and all those little fibers you see there are cell walls. That's cellulose. Okay, let's wrap up this video with just 3 more quick definitions. Monosaccharides would be a single sugar, like this glucose molecule. A disaccharide would be 2 sugars bonded together. This one is sucrose, or table sugar. Notice that it's made of a glucose molecule chemically bonded to a fructose molecule. Fructose is the sugar that you find in fruit. Here's another disaccharide you've probably heard of before, lactose. Lactose is the sugar you would find in milk. People who are lactose intolerant have a problem digesting this. They don't have the proper enzyme to digest this sugar. A polysaccharide would be many sugars bonded together. Starch is a polysaccharide. It would contain much more energy than the single glucose molecule up at the top of the page. Okay, that's enough for today. I'll see you all in class tomorrow.